I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores. Welcome everyone who is joining us on the live stream this evening, and welcome all members of the committee. Before we begin the committee of the whole meeting this evening, I'd like to, in recognition of the most recent discoveries of unmarked graves at residential schools, and in solidarity with our neighbors and friends of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, I'd like to call for 1 minute of silence from members of council. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is disclose of pecuniary interest. I'll ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. We have no open forum requests. We do have 3 delegations this evening. Before we get into the delegations, I'll just remind all the delegates that council affords 10 minutes to each of our delegations. So we'll ask that you respect those timelines. Our first delegation this evening is from Doug Longmire, and he's here to talk to us about the concern on bump outs. Mr. Longmire.
Okay, let's see, I'm unmuted there.
Yep, we have you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mayor Charbonneau and Deputy Mayor Mike Myatt. I did get in contact with Amanda Frost the other day, last week, and my concern is why is not a study being done to see if the bump outs are actually working or not? Because over the last 3 years, I've monitored several days on my hours a day on my mobility scooter, and I'm coming near death experiences several times. And I was just wondering if we could get some kind of committee to look into just seeing how safe they are.
Sure. And you may see later on our agenda this evening, Doug, we're talking about a new streetscape plan for downtown Southampton, and hiring a consultant to work on that. And there's going to be a public process associated with that. So there'll be an opportunity through that process for folks like you to give your input, and you can talk about the issues you've had with the bump outs, and that's the process that we have in place for sort of looking at Southampton's streetscape, and hopefully it'll give us, well, we fully intend for it to give us a plan going forward that we can implement to improve the streetscape in downtown Southampton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
That's my concern, because I've had just recently a real nasty experience where I actually was very fortunate to see Sergeant Craig Fletcher come by and issue a warning to the driver, and he was able to get the gentleman to apologize to me, which is greatly appreciated.
Sure. So I think there may be some comments to the Vice Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Myatt, and then Councillor Grace.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Doug, thanks so much for your presentation tonight. And I know I've talked to you several times about this over the last few months, and it is a real concern of yours, and certainly a concern of others too. There's been, in your particular situation, there's been what we call near misses, and some not so pleasant experiences with the bump outs. I think there's some benefits to them, obviously, but you've had some difficulties, and I know others have had some difficulties too. And I just wondering, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering through the police department too. And I know there's a streetscape plan discussion coming up later on the agenda, Doug. So I think that'd be a good thing, as our mayor alluded to. That's a good forum for you to have, make comment on, Doug, when that,
Yeah.
becomes public, those discussions. So make sure you do comment. It's really important you do that because, we all need to hear those concerns again. And, but I just wondering too, at the same time, Mr. Mayor, for, the police department, if there have been any, I'd be interested to know, have there been any reported incidents, accidents? How's it been the last 2 years since those bump outs were put in? What are we hearing? What are we seeing? And, so there's nothing wrong with revisiting something like this. If there's concerns like Doug has, we should be listening. And so, Doug, there's a good opportunity for you in the next little while to comment on it. So take
Okay,
advantage
very
of it,
good.
okay?
I personally talked to Chief Settle last week, and he has no record of any accidents or mishaps there, but he has told me he would increase the patrols around those areas more.
Good. And I think, I'm sure the Director of Infrastructure is listening, and as we work through the streetscape plan, a consultation with the police would probably be appropriate and something that could be undertaken. So that's something.
There's one more thing I'd like to bring to your attention. If someone could remind your operations manager, several times I've called and left messages about town employees and town vehicles not coming to a full stop at the stop signs. And it's rather bothersome, especially we should be setting an example for the citizens and the visitors here.
Sure. All right, duly noted. Thanks for that. I think I Councilor Mayette next. Councilor Mayette.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Longmire, for bringing this to our attention. I was going to say initially that I will bring this up with the police as a member of the Police Services Board. Our meetings are public, and if you wanted to come and comment and see the statistics that we get presented to us on a monthly basis, you're more than welcome to join in via Zoom or maybe one day even in person. And you can, at that time, you might be able to bring something up, or I will endeavor to make sure that this gets brought to the attention of the inspector who collects the data for us and our statistics, and get him to do some increased monitoring over there. But just for my own information, a question I was wondering, because I don't spend a great deal of time over there and I haven't seen you trying to cross the road, but are you having trouble when you're going parallel to High Street or when you're trying to cross High Street?
Well, I'm trying to cross Huron Street, actually, either going down to the flagpole or coming back.
Okay.
Now, the only time I find it safe now is when there's people actually walking across it. Then the cars seem to stop fine. But any other time, no one, and I mean no one, stops at the stop signs anymore. Not like in the old days before they were installed.
It was my understanding that those bump outs were designed to make it easier or safer for people who were traveling across High Street in like a north-south direction, because it narrows the distance between the points, right? So I guess there was a certain trade-off when those were designed. So yes, I hope to hear from you. And like the Vice Deputy Mayor and the Mayor said, there is an opportunity to have more input as the designs get changed. Thank you.
Sure. Councilor Grace, have a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, I think you've spoken to me about the particular area that is worst for you is that Huron High crossing Huron. And I think from what I've seen there, I think the confusion is that the stop sign is back before the bump out. So people stop there and then they think they can just, go without sort of watching for people, including watching for somebody who's crossing Huron. One thing, that intersection was discussed in our transportation master plan. And I know the Director of Infrastructure is looking closely at what can be done to make that intersection safer too. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Good point. All right, if there's no further questions, thanks very much, Doug. It was nice to see you this evening, and we've heard your comments, and we'll take them into consideration. So thanks very much.
Keep in touch and send me the links for the next meetings that I can comment on, and I'll gladly join.
All right, yep, certainly there'll be some public announcements about that, so look forward to that. Okay, thanks very much. So that'll move us on to our next delegation, which is from David Appel of 20 Miramichi Bay Road. And he's here to talk to us about maintenance of lakeside tree and vegetation overgrowth in Saugeen Shores. Mr. Appel.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor, town councilors, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening regarding some concerns, as you mentioned, regarding overgrowth in Saugeen shores along the lakeside. Just a little bit of background. Our home was purchased in 1986, and the property was chosen primarily because it had an unobstructed view of Lake Huron and Chantry Island. And that view has diminished considerably over the years. I just want to also note that we do pay higher taxes because our properties are assessed at a higher value because we have lake view. So the issue at hand is that we have unmanaged kind of tree and vegetation growth along the lakeshore. And this has, like I said, reduced our view of both the island and the lake and our enjoyment of our property, as well as become a significant annoyance to not only ourselves, but other individuals who live along the lake shore, either across from the lake or directly on the lake. So the other potential issue here is the inevitable adverse effect on property value as the lake view diminishes. And this is another one of our concerns. I'll just also mention that in my discussions with councillors and town leadership over the years, I've ascertained that there are three main concerns for not allowing residents to do any pruning of trees or vegetation. One of them is regarding shoreline erosion. The other one is regarding snow accumulations on roadways. And then obviously the other is that such pruning by owners would be in contravention of the parks bylaw 1.15. I do want to note, as I put in my presentation that you have a copy of, that a large percentage of the shoreline roadway has absolutely no or very limited tree coverage. So I do consider that a rather minor argument against not allowing pruning because of that fact. So the big picture is that, as I call it, many owners over the years have taken matters into their own hands and severely cut or trimmed trees along the shoreline. And that's also happened, as I mentioned in my presentation, in front of several prominent residents. So in addition to the verbal outline that I gave you, I provided some pictures. I won't go in detail and reference those on every segment of the presentation, but suffice to say that the first couple of pictures, which are a winter scene, show the view from our home of a clear, unobstructed view of the lake and Chantry Island. That picture being 18 years old, I realize. However, things have changed significantly since then. Anyway, the other pictures, three of them, one of them showing pictures of stumps that where people have cut down fairly significantly sized trees. That is not at all what I am proposing that the residents be allowed to do. And the other couple of pictures are just random homes along the lake shore where people have continued to maintain their view of the lake. And then there is also a picture of North Shore Road showing what I just mentioned, that there is large sections along the lake shore where there are little to no trees to protect the roadway from snow accumulation. The last couple of pictures in my presentation show some of the reason why I'm here tonight, and that is there's one picture showing very small, currently very small poplar growth in front of our home. And my wife and my concern is that those trees will grow considerably and will completely obstruct our view of the lake. So it's, and then another couple of pictures are just some of the other small branches that I'm requesting that us and other people along the lake are allowed to trim back with permission from the town, so that we can maintain our lake view. So some of the things that my wife and I have done to date is we've had both written and verbal consultations with town leadership and council members, dating all the way back to 2008. And also in more recent years, I've had some of the councillors and staff have been kind enough to come out and do a site visit to see our concerns firsthand. So the governing bylaw, I'm not going to read it in detail. It's there in print. Basically, I just want to comment on the fact that, you know, the bylaw reads, you know, it references destroying and damaging vegetation, which is once again not something that I or anyone else, I don't believe, along the lake would be wanting to do. I do mention that the words trim or prune are not included in the descriptive, extensive descriptive action words in the outlined in bylaw 1.15. Clearly, we understand the town needs to protect vegetation, and particularly in parks area and things like that. So what I'm proposing tonight is that the council would seriously and carefully consider amending this bylaw to allow Lakeview and Lakeside owners of properties to request a supervised trimming of trees to either improve or maintain their view of the lake, while respecting the need to not interfere with erosion control, which is a serious problem, as we've all seen in recent years. So just some of the things that have been suggested to me when I've brought this up over the past 13 years is, and these are close to verbatim quotes, and of course there's no names attached for obvious reasons, but you know, some people have said to me, just go over and do what other people do at night, you know, trim back these troublesome areas. Some people, I've also had the suggestion that just have MPAC lower your taxes. That's not a viable option for us, because that equates to us having a lower property value. And it's also not good for the town, because lower taxes equals less operating revenue. Another thing I've been told, or we've been told, is absolutely no trimming or cutting is allowed for sightline, and stop all trimming or you will be fined. So you can see that this is a rather strict or inflexible sort of approach from the town in reference to this bylaw. It creates a win-lose situation, which I'm hoping that we can mitigate and come up with a win-win. It also, I have to say that, you know, it makes a person feel like a criminal too, when they want to just maintain their view from their home, and you know, there's a lot of activity that goes on at night, where people have, you know, made, you know, take matters in their own hands along the shoreline. Anyway, what I'm proposing is a win-win proposal. I'm hoping that it's deemed as reasonable by council. So the suggestion I have is that residents that want to do, like my wife and I would like, is have a consultation with the community services or parks department, and have a supervised prune or trim of problematic growth. It should be of limited or no cost to the town, because the people like ourselves would do either the work ourselves or have it done at our own expense. Could also be a revenue generating source by insisting that a permit be required. And shoreline erosion would in any way be compromised, nor would snow accumulation protection. And owners would only be allowed to trim what they're given permission to. And if they don't follow the rules, then they could be fined accordingly. Some of possible future ramifications is I don't feel that bylaw enforcement is the way to go about handling this. And also, as property values dramatically climb, and we've seen that in even this past week, where a house on North Shore Road sold for close to $2 million. Not a great example because that particular house doesn't have much tree growth in front of it, but people that are paying those kind of money, that kind of money for homes along the lake, are not going to be accepting of trees blocking their view in 5-10 years down the road. I'm not a lawyer, but I did do a very brief review of case law and found out that there's no legal right to have a view per se. However, there is a legal right to prevent an annoyance, and I would suggest that this unmanaged growth across the road is certainly a huge annoyance to my wife and I and other owners. So I'm just asking that Council reconsider their hardline position on this and try and come up with a more cooperative win-win solution for us taxpayers along the lake. I'd also ask that that we come up with a reasonable win-win solution. And as it was pointed out to me by one of the staff, you wouldn't go over and cut your neighbor's tree without their permission, and I agree with that. And so we're just hoping that we can come up with some type of option where we can get permission to do a supervised cut. And I think I'm pretty well out of time, so I will. I had other things I wanted to mention, but I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Rappa. I'm sure there'll be some questions or comments, and so you might get a chance to make some further comments. I will ask if there's questions or comments from members of the committee. I'll start with Councillor Schreider and then come to Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, and through you, and thank you very much, David, for the outline of your delegation and the photos as well, and very familiar with that area. I guess maybe more of a question to staff, and I'm not sure if Amanda's on the line. I know that Jane is, but our waterfront maintenance plan or beach maintenance plan, does that include the areas in between the two towns, or is it just really including our beach area that we maintain?
The beach maintenance plan covers our entire 18 kilometers of trail, of a waterfront beach area and natural area as well, dynamic beaches.
Okay, so outlined in that maintenance plan then addresses these areas as well?
It does address those areas, and I can make comment about this particular area in that we have reached out at least a year and a half ago to Hydro One to consider trimming those trees because of the hydro lines at the request of a resident in that area. So I believe there has been some trimming that has occurred. I'd have to follow up to see if that is if that was completed or not, but it was certainly a request into Hydro One because of the hydro wires in that area.
Right, perfect. And I guess just my last question or comment would be, I think that wherever we do land on this, and if it's going to be directed back to staff to come back with some options for consideration, I think my concern would be allowing residents to perform work on municipal property. And I think there's lots of liability and legality that we would have to consider before doing that. But whether there's other options for consideration where it's a coordinated approach, I'm not sure of. But anyway, thank you very much, David. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I think I saw Councillor Mayette next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, David, for making this presentation. As you know, David, I've been down and seen the vicinity where you live, and in fact, I was just down there on the weekend. I took a drive by and got out for a bit of a walk and looked over the vegetation in that stretch, and I'm obviously sympathetic to your plight. As I expressed to you when we met last year, I think that unmanaged growth of vegetation in that area is a little out of hand, and it amounts to essentially weeds. We've got weeds and shrubs, and poplar trees grow like weeds, and if they're not managed, they will grow out of control. And I don't think there's any sort of controlled management of the woodlands or the trees and shrubs in that area. And I would certainly support an idea where, in a controlled situation, either have a professional arborist hired, as you suggest, at the cost of the landowner, to go in there and make a recommendation and do some controlled trimming to keep the area looking nice. I mean, we don't let our other park areas, we go to great lengths to other park areas of the town to make them look nice and trim trees and plant shrubs and cut grass and all those sorts of things. And I don't think that we should treat this area any differently. It's public land that is high visibility. It's not back in a bush somewhere. This is a high visibility spot with our premier trail along it, and we shouldn't just let it grow wild. I mean, there are some reasons, as you point out in your presentation, about snow, places for snow to go, and the causing of drifting and those sorts of things. But I think in a controlled manner, with the professional recommendation from an arborist, I would support a controlled trimming of the area. So we'll look in to see what we can do about maybe amending the bylaw. But thanks for bringing it to our attention once again. And those are creative solutions you've suggested. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matt.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments from members? I think, I appreciate very much your delegation this evening, Mr. Fell, and I was intrigued by your suggestion at a permitting system to allow for something for controlled maintenance of areas like this. I think that from council's perspective, when we think about something like this, I think we need to think more broadly than the waterfront. If we allow people to maintain municipal property or trees in one part of town, it's likely going to be required for us to permit that in other circumstances. So I think it's a broad discussion that we need to think carefully about, but you've made a couple of interesting suggestions. And I would say that, if we can come up with a methodology, perhaps a permitting system that would allow controlled maintenance in places like this, and gave an avenue for people to, through consultation with the town, achieve, as you say, a win-win. I think that would then put us in a better position to enforce more firmly our bylaws against people who act outside of those regulations, because I think there are people who venture onto public lands and cut trees and do other things, and we can't, and that cannot be acceptable without permission. So we need to find a way to, as you say, create a win-win, and find a way to allow people to move forward in a way that's compliant with the law, and then also enforce the law where people choose not to comply. So that's a balance I'm interested in exploring, and hopefully we can get our staff to come back with some options on how we might do that. So thanks again. I see the Vice Deputy Mayor has a comment. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to make that suggestion. I thank you for your presentation, David, and you mentioned some very good points and some fair points. And I think it is a good idea. I mean, let's send it back to staff and take a look at the bylaw and see how it reads, and come back with some recommendations on what might be workable. So I've driven by that area many times, and I've seen some of the work that's gone on down there on that side, on the water side, and I just think staff need to come back with some recommendations. So thanks again for your presentation.
Yep, we can certainly make that request, and I think I don't see the director of infrastructure on here. I think the director of community services is here, and the clerk certainly has heard that request. So staff will take that request, I'm sure, and come back to us when they're able to. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Appel. Appreciate it very much, and you have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Mayor Charbonneau and councillors.
And we'll move on then to our third delegation, which is from John Mann. And he's here to talk to us about systemic injustice on the Port Elgin Main Beach. Mr. Mann.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Prior to starting my delegation, I just want to, on the residential schools genocide, I think it's important, and I strongly urge council to have town hall meetings regarding that. And I just want to make that comment before I start my delegation, because I think there should be a criminal investigation on each unmarked grave supervised by the original peoples. Thank you for letting me just urge town hall meetings, Mayor. Now commencing my delegation tonight. The first time Mr. Danini presented the Cedar Crescent Village, he made the very important and I thought just a wonderful comment. He started out by saying, each of us, the population of Saugeen Shores is 13,714 people at that time. And he said, each and every one of the 13,714 people must have their own say on what happens on our main beach. And I thought, well, that's a very good beginning. But after that, it became an all or nothing proposition that the Cedar Crescent Village was either approved in every aspect or it would not go forward at all. So the 13,714 voices became one voice, that being Mr. Danini's. And it played that way, in my view, throughout the entire time up to the point where you signed a lease. Prior to the SVCA approving the project, which still defies common sense. But in any event, I'm here tonight because on May 25, 2021, Patricia Frank presented a spectacular delegation regarding a survey that she personally started and had conducted, where 1,800 people participated, and she presented it in a way that showed that only 5% were in favor of something like the banquet center or the conference center. But most of them, virtually all, wanted something. But then council said, wait a minute, the 1,800, well, you subtract 400 that were just visitors. So you have 1,400. That is only 10% of the total 14,000 population. So council made the point of, well, Patricia, I mean, it's just 10% of the 14,000. So in my view, all 1,400 and all 1,800 were dismissed summarily, and their comments about the village dismissed summarily, even though the original one was every person in the 13,714 population was going to have a say in this. But then council said the community, for the most part, is not against it. That Councillor Kristen Schreider said, the community, quote, the community for the most part is not against it, end quote. Well, that's a double negative. I mean, it seems, and I agree, most people want something done. But she says, for the most part, well, the most part does not include a conference center. The most part does not include a banquet center. When you go to a beach, Mr. Danini made the point that there's nothing to do. That's why he wanted to build a village. Well, that's the point of a beach. There's nothing to do. That's why people go there. There's nothing to do. Kids have a great time because they build sand castles and so on, playing the sand, playing the water. Old people like me just sit there. But that's what we want to do when we go to a beach. And that's why a lot of people on vacation, hey, I want to go to the beach. They don't say, gee, I want to go to the beach and go to that conference center. It's illogical. It defies common sense. And so Kristen Schreider, the counselor, and the rest of council agreed with it because no one piped up, said the community for the most part is not against it. So to which Patricia Frank made the brilliant response, and I'll quote, brilliant response, there has to be something done to prove to the public, prove to us that this is what the people will want and we will back off. So Patricia just says, show us, you know, the town of Saugeen Shores, all the people want a conference center, a banquet center. Show us. Nothing, flatlined, no response from anybody in council because they don't have it. They have another survey of themselves, made by themselves, which was only 1,500 people with 8% visitors. So it was less than the people that responded to Patricia's wonderful, tireless work. And only 5% of that survey wanted a conference center or banquet hall. So 95% said no dice. So that's what our council is relying on. But all of a sudden, 1,400 people are try to make a point, speak, use their fundamental right to communicate with their council. And the council, in my view, says, we don't want to hear from you. And then you got Councilor Rich saying, you know, Patricia, you're just the front person for a special interest group. Well, I responded to her survey. I'm not part of any special interest group. And I don't know how many are, if any, are part of a special interest group. But who wouldn't be a special interest group to preserve our beach and have it, you know, as the town calls it, a relic sand beach. One of the few in the world that's fresh water with the fine sand we have. Only Sauble Beach has sand like we do. Southampton doesn't even have it. Kincardine doesn't have it. Goderich doesn't have it. Bayfield doesn't have it. We've got the best in the world, in my view. Freshwater sand beach. And we're going to cover it with a building, you know, a conference center that beaches. You're covering a relic beach that you even call a relic beach. It should have preservation like Niagara Falls or some, you know, national treasure. This is a national treasure in my view. It's an international treasure. So that's my main concern is that council doesn't take under consideration our fundamental rights to speak to them. And it just flatlines and we don't have any say whatsoever. And this is a 50-year lease. 50 years, this sand is going to disappear. And we're told, hey, thank the renters for letting you walk on the beach and park your car there and watch the sunsets. Thank the renters. You're walking on their rented property. That used to be public property. Now we got this private public thing. Well, we used to have no problem walking on that beach where they're going to put these buildings. So, and the other problem with that is some people can't walk and they drive up to watch this world famous sunsets because they can't walk. So that's being taken away from them. For 50 years, it's being taken away from them. And what's the precedent? Hey, if you got a lot of money, maybe you can buy the water. You know, they're throwing $10 million. What do you people pony up and we'll let you do it. That's the most dangerous part. Special interest group, Mr. Dineen, what is he? He's the most special interest of any of us. One person and maybe a few other investors. And they form a company. Why? Limited liability. That's why you form a company. You don't have as much responsibility.
Up on 10 minutes there, Mr.
Well, the
Mann,
rest of us
so wrap it up, please.
Sacrifice. Thank you, Your Honor. Let's see. What else? I'm having one of these senior moments, but I think it's part of the system of injustice that I've been talking about. We only want to be heard. We want to be meaningfully heard. And I don't know why there's such a problem with that. I came to this town because it's a small town. I thought we'd be Andy and Mayberry and Aunt Pete, but then we end up like Chicago. I mean, why not hear us? Meaningfully hear us. Meaningfully include us. And you don't have a response to who wants this. So got a few other things to say, but
Well, we're up over 10 minutes, Mr. Mann, and I would say that
I can't remember.
nobody has been heard by this
your
council more than you have, and we're content to hear you in accordance with the procedural bylaw whenever you like.
But meaningfully hear me. That's the point. And
Well, you're
and
talking to me right
voters,
now,
I
and
understand voters
And I'm
have
hearing,
that.
are there questions or comments from members of the committee?
The
Are there questions or comments from members?
voters
of the
can
committee?
only use that washroom now.
I don't see any questions or comments from members of
Well,
the committee. Is
Mr.
there
Mayor,
a Vice Deputy Mayor?
I'm going to make a comment.
Sure.
You know, my name's in Mr. Mann's report, and I just think I like to say, John, that thank you for your presentation, and I still believe that I know I'm listening, and I believe the majority of council are listening, and I'm still optimistic, John. That I know some people aren't, but I'm still optimistic that we're going to end up with a development that is going to be a good development for the broader community. And I know you mentioned my name about the 50-year lease, John, and I just want to say that SPCA and coastal engineering reports and all those other things that are being done right now, there was really no purpose, John, of doing all of those reports before a 50-year lease was signed, because if the developer wasn't going to get a 50-year lease, council decided way back it wasn't a lease, all those reports wouldn't have been required. So I think it's one of those things that it's kind of a 50-year lease, maybe a moot point if SPCA decides to not permit the development to move forward. So I think the investors needed to know for financial reasons and that they had a lease in place before they could proceed with engineering drawings and other things and financing and so on and so forth. I think the 50-year lease had to be done first, John, and I maintain that. I stand by that, and I don't want to prolong this discussion a whole long time, maybe with myself, but my name was mentioned, and I think it had to be done early because for the reasons I stated. So anyways, just want to thank you for coming and speaking to council, John.
But what about the people that made comments about the banquet center? They made legitimate comments. There's no debate, no discourse, no dialogue, no discussion whatsoever. And you just, Mr. Denise says all or nothing. You can't even move it back to the mini golf that you destroyed. Something that the United States Golf Association uses as the promotion, for God's sake. It's a wonderful thing for a beach, but that's gone. Why not put the conference center there? There's no discussion. You got to have it where we watch sunsets.
Yeah, there was a significant discussion in 2019 ahead of approving the lease, and so I reject your comments there. It's not accurate. Councillor Schreider, did you have a question? Or
well,
comment?
There's no debate, Your Honor. I think it's
anybody
against
has
the
any
law
more
to
questions or
debate
comments.
this stuff.
So thank you very much, Mr. Mann. We
All you
appreciate your time
shores.
this evening, and have a good evening. So we'll move on.
It'll
now
do
on
nothing.
the agenda
I agree.
to
You'll not act on any.
Thank you. We'll move on then to our public meeting, which is on the development charges. And so we have we have a report, and so we'll start with the Supervisor of Development Services, who will introduce our presenter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the public meeting. I know you introduced that. About a month ago, I introduced the development charges preliminary findings. We've published the development charges background study and draft bylaw on the town's website. And the purpose of the meeting is, well, John Murphy, consultant with DFA Infrastructure, will make a presentation about the study and the bylaw. After the presentation, the consultant will then take questions or feedback from the public and committee members. The feedback, whatever we receive, will be reviewed and where appropriate incorporated into the background study, revise the background study, and we'll come back to the committee of the whole on July 12th. And as you know, and for the public's benefit, those who are listening and watching, the primary purpose of the DC bylaw is to assist in the financing of growth-related infrastructure and services. In other words, if growth comes to our community as we anticipate, we'll need to spend money on those capital works in order to continue the services our existing residents enjoy. The background study tells us what those capital needs are for the long term. And over the last few years, and you've probably heard me repeat this several times, we've taken deliberate care to understand our long-term needs. We've been aligning and continue to integrate with our transportation master plan, the water and wastewater master plan, drainage master plan, official plan, and other documents, and aligning and integrating, as I said, with our long-range financing tools, such as through this DC process. I do want to note before I turn it over to John, and thank you, John, for bearing with me. It's important to note that the projects identified in the study are mainly illustrative. Though they specify dollar amounts, dates to construct, and other details, these can be adjusted, including the projects themselves. As conceived, the study's primary purpose is to illustrate the town intends to build infrastructure to meet the needs of the growth and maintain service levels for the community. And while doing so, it recognizes that installing this infrastructure happens over the long term, and so things can change. I'm happy to go into details or provide examples if you need further explanation, but at this time, I'd like to turn it over to John. He will lead you through the study and the presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Jay. I hope you can see the screen. I did share it.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, let's try this again. I'm now in limbo. I have to join in again.
If not, I can share and just, John, you tell me when to forward.
Because okay, I think I may have logged out. That's not good.
Why don't we give that a try? Jay, why don't you try and share the screen? and
Sure,
see if we can-
I'll just go ahead, John. You let me know.
Can you, okay. Now I don't even know if I'm in the meeting again because it said share screen. I went to share the screen. It pulled up my. Can you actually see me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, you're fine. You're there.
I wonder why.
And now we have the presentation on the screen there, John. Jay,
Okay,
he seems to be sharing it.
it's a little corner, so I'm gonna see if I can expand it. There it is. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of public who are watching. I'm John Murphy from DFA Infrastructure. We were retained to undertake your development charge background, or preparation of the development charges background study. This is the presentation or the public, the statutory public meeting, which is one of the requirements of being allowed to impose development charges. So the objective of today's presentation is to provide a background on development charges. I know we've gone through this before, but members of public who are watching may not. Present the draft development charge study and to obtain feedback from the public should there be any. Okay, so what development charges are? These are the fees that municipalities impose on future development, and they are to pay for growth-related capital costs. The premise is that growth pays for growth, and we're trying to maintain that objective. What should be noted is that development charges that are collected do not pay for operating costs of that growth-related infrastructure, nor does it pay for any asset replacement. That's typically paid through taxpayers and ratepayers. So as I noted earlier, the requirements for imposing development charges are three. One is the preparation of the background study, which we're doing right now. One is, well, that we have done. One is to hold a public meeting, which we're holding right now. And one thing that should be noted is that development charges, the development charge bylaw is only valid for 5 years. So this exercise is done every 5 years. Okay, so the three components of the development charge background study is a development forecast, or the projection of anticipated residential and non-residential growth. Also, what needs to be calculated as part of this exercise is what is called historic service levels. That pretty much means that for certain services, the growth-related capital cannot exceed the average service level over the past 10 years. And of course, the capital program, which is necessary to be able to provide services to that anticipated growth over the forecast period. So this is what we call the growth projections for residential development. It's broken into number of new units, broken out between single detached, multiples, apartments, and seasonal development. It has a projection of the number of new units, as well as the population that will exist or live within those units. As you can see, over the next 10 years, you're looking at around 1,700 new units, which will house about 3,600 new residents. Now, when looking out over the I guess we call it the build out, which is to 2041, we're looking at around 1,900 to 2,000 new units, or actually, I'll take a step back. That's between 2031 and 2041. But when we're looking at the residential growth out to 2041, which is to build out, we're looking at around 3,600 to 3,700 new residential units, which will house around close to 8,000 new residents for the township. Now, when we're looking at the non-residential growth, which is commercial, industrial, institutional, we look at it in regards to the number of new employees. And we're looking at around 1,100 new employees over the 10-year period, and around 2,400 to build out. Now, to use this information in regards to calculating the non-residential development charges, that has to be converted into square footage, because the development charge for non-residential use is on a per square footage basis. And so actually, in this case, sorry, per square meters, you're looking at around 72,000 square meters of new non-residential development over the 10-year period, and around 162,000 square meters of non-residential development over out to build out to 2041. So this is what we call the historical service levels. As you can see, it's applicable to certain services as mandated by the Development Charges Act. What this says is that the net growth related capital cannot exceed those values identified here. And I think there's one or two services that where the net growth related capital exceeds that service level, which means that there's a certain portion of growth related capital that cannot be recovered from growth over that planned forecast period. And the amount that cannot be recovered is put into the next development charge calculation, and hopefully the service level will have increased so that that value or the non-recoverable amount can be recovered in future development charge bylaws. So here are the gross capital costs, which were identified in the various master plans and through discussions with senior staff. You're looking at around $85 million in townwide services. That would be, again, this isn't the net growth related cost, this is the gross costs of the projects. And when looking at sewer and water, when adding sewer and water in, you're looking at around $148 million of gross capital costs. Now, there are a number of requirements to deduct values in establishing the growth related costs or net growth related costs that can be recovered from future development. So we start with the 148 million, and we have to deduct any grants and subsidies that are eligible or that anticipated for those capital projects which have a growth component. The largest deduction really is going to be the benefit to existing development. So these projects that are identified here are the total project costs, and some projects benefit existing residential and non-residential property owners, as well as the anticipated new growth. So we've, with staff and looking at engineering estimates, we've deducted what we believe to be the value of that project, which would benefit the existing population, both residential and non-residential. Now, the 10% required discount no longer applies as a result of amendments to the Development Charges Act. So that in the past reduced the amount of growth-related costs that can be recovered from future development charges. So that amendment actually benefited municipalities in regards to ensuring that the growth-related capital costs were reflective of what's actually being incurred by the municipality. So we're now down to about 95 million of the 148 million that would be allowed to be funded or recovered from future development. Now, there's a requirement to deduct the current development charge revenues that reside in reserves. It's almost like a prepayment. And also now we have what we call post-period capacity to carry forward. Now, this consists of the service level cap amount, which cannot be recovered because the growth-related costs would provide a service level higher than the average service level, but also specifically in regards to the indoor recreation, which I believe is the new pool, that 10 million or $11 million is the component or the portion of that project which is anticipated to benefit development beyond the 2030 period. So I should say now we're down to 72 million in capital costs, which can be recovered from anticipated residential and non-residential development. Now that is broken down between what the residential share is and what the non-residential share is. So for certain services like indoor recreation, outdoor recreation, and library services, those services benefit typically the residential sector of the municipality. So there was no portion allocated to commercial, industrial, or institutional. Now, when you look at the other services, those the allocation between residential and non-residential was based on the percentage of the population and employment growth. So what we have is our calculated charge, and for residential, it's a cost per capita. So the net growth related cost was divided by the anticipated residential growth to arrive at a growth per capita by service. And the non-residential component or share of the growth related costs were divided by the square meters, anticipated growth in square meters of non-residential development. So when we look at establishing the development charge for residential dwelling units, you look at the occupancy of per person or per unit for each of the development types. So we have single and semi-detached had a person per unit, estimated person per unit of 2.76. Other multiples 1.81 apartments, and I apologize for that spelling. Both of them. The 1.7, these are the large apartment units, and the smaller apartment units 1.18. And in the previous bylaw, there was a charge per trailer unit. Now that wasn't identified in Stats Canada, so we kept that value from the previous DC study. And when arriving at the calculated charge by dwelling unit, we applied those PPU values to the residential cost per capita to in calculating those charges by service. So what we did here is we provided a comparison of the calculated development charges under this development charge background exercise to your existing charges. And as you can see, there are increases across the board in all residential dwelling types, as well as the non-residential charge, both in townwide services and for water and wastewater. Now, when compared to other municipalities in the proximity of Saugeen Shores, as well as comparators, you can see how the current and proposed development charges are in comparison to some of those other comparator municipalities. And you're not the highest, nor are you the lowest. You're somewhat maybe in between. But again, when comparing development charges to other municipalities, there's so many things to consider. Population growth, the service levels, how recent are the master plans that are undertaken, because that usually drives these costs. So there's so much to compare, so much to consider when comparing other municipalities, and it's hard to say, well, why are we so much higher or so much lower? All you can do is look at it from the cost perspective of the developer. But at the end of the day, the development charges that are calculated are the charges that are necessary to ensure that the growth-related costs that are identified are recovered from the anticipated growth, which is reflected in the background study. Any charge that would be less than that would in essence mean that the taxpayer, assuming that those projects proceed, it leaves the shortfall in development charges to be recovered from the tax base and the sewer and water users. Now, when we look at the non-residential charge, both current and proposed in relation to the comparable comparator municipalities, the proposed non-residential charge would be considered on the high end, well, the highest of all the comparative municipalities. But some of these municipalities have not undertaken or updated their development charge background study. So very seldom do municipalities see development charges decline when a new development charge background study is undertaken. The capital cost, or the cost or construction costs of infrastructure has not declined. So that needs to be kept in mind, that some of these municipalities have not undertaken recently the update of the development charge background study. So in going forward, it's anticipated that the new that the background study will be approved by council, as well as the proposed bylaw on July 19th, with the bylaw to come in force on July 6th. That's because the existing bylaw expires July 7th. Now there is an appeal period. It's 40 days after approval, so that, I think I calculated August 27th. So any member of the public can appeal the bylaw and the calculated charge. We hope that that does not happen. So I am here, and as is Jay, for any questions members of council may have.
Okay, thanks very much. So we don't, Linda, we don't have any members of the public who are interested in asking questions on this evening. Just want to clarify that.
No, we don't, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we will move on then to questions or comments from members of the committee. Start with Councillor Grace, then come to the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, John and Jay, for the report. I have a question that comes from one of the appendices, Appendix C for Table 3, and it's about police services. And perhaps Councillor Mayette might be able to comment on this. I don't know, but it talks about almost $3 million for new police building site work between 2021 and 2030. And I'm just kind of wondering what that might be for.
Can you highlight which table it is? You said table 3?
Table 3, Appendix C4, Table 3.
All right, so furniture, equipment, or equipment and gear. So this was the work that has done in the last 10 years?
No, it says it's for new police building site work between
Right.
2021 and 2030.
All right, so maybe that's perhaps Schedule D or Appendix D, because that's what the future stuff is in Appendix D. That's all.
If I may, Jay, I think that's the
Okay.
that's the post period value from the previous study.
Oh, okay.
So I guess the police building was there's a new police building in the previous development charge background study, of which a portion was pushed out to future development, so was not included in the previous study. So this is the value that now is included for that works, which will benefit the population beyond the previous DC study, which now is part of this study.
Okay, so just to clarify, so that's not talking about additional work worth $3 million to be done, but giving credit for that work and being able to claim another certain amount of money.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the Vice Deputy Mayor next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, John, and for your presentation. And DCs are always, or can be, controversial somewhat, especially when you're talking about increasing $5,000 or $6,000 and with development charges. It's on a residential unit, it can be somewhat controversial. I see, Ryan Walker from Walker Homes is suggesting that the increase be phased in. I'm sure staff would like some direction on that. I can't really support phasing them in. I think when we talk about $85 million in gross capital costs and $148 million with including water and sewer, we've got some huge, some huge capital projects ahead of us, and I think phasing in, for me, anyways, I can't be supportive of it. I think we've got so many needs from a capital cost perspective. I see Rowan Sound, last year ago waived development charge, Mr. Mayor, for apartment dwelling units, and I don't know whether I can get there or not. You're talking about $14,000, I think, in cost for a development charge for 2 or 3 bedroom unit, and I think $10,000 for a single. So I mean, 100 units, it's $1 million in development charges for 100 apartment buildings being built in our community. And I know I discussed with a developer recently that Saugeen Shores see the way to doing what Owen Sound did, and Grey County actually too, upper tier. Waived all DCs for new apartment dwelling units of 10 units or more. And so I didn't know whether staff had thought about that or consider, this council would consider, but I struggle a little bit with waiving, with waiving complete. But I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if we could ask staff if council would maybe consider this at a future meeting. I'm talking about affordable attainable housing here, but I'm just wondering if there could be some form of incentive built into the DC bylaw, whereas, developers looking at building 1, 2, 3 bedroom units, if there's a percentage of say 10 or 20 or 25%, whatever the amount be, for accessible units, for example. We are an aging population. And, I wonder if we should be incentivizing developers with their DC charges rather than that $14,000 a unit. If it could look a little different than that, or whether we should be handling through the community improvement program, through our toolkit, I don't know. But I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if we could ask staff to, before it's formally approved, if we could maybe think about that. Again, I'm not maybe totally convinced we should waive 100% like Grey County and Owen Sound did with waiving development charges for apartment dwellings, but they get really aggressive over there. And their building Strathcona School right now is being transformed into 80 or 100 units for apartments by various construction. And up in Canadian Tire, there's another huge development going up their apartment dwelling unit. The development charges have been waived for apartment units. So they've gotten really aggressive with that. And should we be to to encourage our developers to build 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartment units to help with the affordable, attainable housing standpoint situation. So that would be my suggestion. I'm not in support of phasing in development charges, but I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if we could ask staff, the council have to support this, I guess, but obviously, but could staff at least think about, what are some of the options around, development charges for the 1, 2, 3 bedroom units? There's 3 bedroom units, for example. There's a huge need here for families that can't afford our housing prices here that are going to have to rent. But can we encourage the developers to build with incentivizing something that our rents are lower? Can that happen? And Mr. Mayor, you've always said too that the more stock you bring in, the more inventory you bring in with apartment dwellings, hopefully that maybe will help drive the price down. So anyway, that's just a thought. I was wondering if we could ask staff to consider that.
Do you have any comments you want to make to that, Jay?
I do, and I'm sort of been holding my biting my tongue, holding my lips, whatever, because I have some thoughts. I mean, if Owen Sound made that decision, it must work for them. That's fine. I guess, and our task force recommended prioritizing rental units for financial incentives. They also identified, though, that it's important to ensure other types of housing are provided too, that namely accessible units, units that are affordable, units that increase the diversity of housing stock. And I would include the number of bedrooms for that, because part of attainable housing is adequate housing. We get a glut of 2 bedroom units. They're not adequate for larger families, and maybe they're oversized for single person families, so households. So I think certainly the DC Act provides a lot of flexibility. I'm pretty confident a provision could be built into, and we can recommend to council if it's so your desire, that we could go a step further than the Owen Sound or Grey County and say we want rental units, but if you build rental, purpose-built rental, as they say, with say accessible units combined, we'll happily waive DCs, because we know we're getting two social matters addressed, both the rental and a social need like accessible housing. So I think there's a way of doing both for our community with DCs.
Okay, yeah, I think I mean, it would be interesting when you I mean, this is a public meeting, and so we can put ideas on the table. I think it would be interesting when you come back with some recommendations for council's approval to give us some options on that front to consider. So that's good. Are there further questions or comments from members of the committee? I don't see any. So thank you very much for this presentation. I guess our next step is to have this come back in a forum for us to have some discussions on and consider for approval. I think it's clear, as we've said several times, that these development charges are really going to be a critical component of financing the major infrastructure that we're going to need to build to accommodate everybody who's going to live here, who already lives here, and who's going to move here in the future in the coming years. So it's very important that we're doing this work, and looking forward to seeing the bylaw come back for council's consideration. I guess it's in July. We're expecting that to happen. Is that right, Jay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very good then. So if there's nothing further, then that concludes the public meeting, and we'll move on to reports of municipal officers and committees, and 7.2, which is a general government. Which is the general government, and we have one report, which is a staff report on records retention bylaw, and the clerk.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Town of Saugeen Shores bylaw with respect to our records retention schedule requires updating. It was passed in 1999 and remains in effect. The purpose of the bylaw is to provide a retention periods for all the records that are created and maintained by the town. The draft bylaw before you adopts the records retention schedule, as well as authorizes the clerk to amend the schedule from time to time as recommended by the Ontario Municipal Records Management System.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We have a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to update the records retention schedule for the town of Saugeen Shores. Is there any questions or comments to that recommendation? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right, that moves us then on to 7.3, infrastructure and development. And the first report is a staff report on development and implementation of a traffic sign management program, inventory update, and retroreflectivity inspection. Retroreflectivity. Is there, who is giving this presentation? Okay.
I'm not sure there is one, but I can do my best.
Well, no, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll read the recommendation if there's any questions or comments. It's recommended that council approve the single source purchase to complete the inventory, inspection, and assessments of regulatory and warning signs for a 5-year term to Advantage Data Collection Limited at a cost of $5.25 per sign, an approximate total annual operating value of $15,000 to be funded from the annual operating budget. Are there questions or comments from members? I don't see any, so we'll ask all in favor. That's carried. All right, and that moves us on to the second report, which is a staff report on a pre-servicing agreement for the Southampton Landing subdivision. And do you have any comments you want to make on this one, Jay?
No, I think the report provides some information there for you, and if you have questions, I can answer them.
Okay, thank you. There's a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to authorize a pre-servicing agreement for the Southampton Landing subdivision. Are there questions or comments? We'll start with the deputy mayor and then come to the vice deputy mayor. Oh, you're on mute there, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Jay, we talked about this. I have real concerns about the stream, the retention pond, the clear stripping of the land around the stream. It's a natural fed stream from up that goes up just past the town shed, flows through there. Every time there's rain, it's overflows. I really want to see that something is done, that we do not strip the trees or the vegetation away from the stream to stop any erosion. It's been done. It's eroding in there right now. If you go past there, we've got lots of dirt going into the stream, filtering down through. I know we've got the rock pile there to kind of stop it, but I want to see some kind of retention plan. And I don't know whether this goes through our environmental group, or we can ask that this does go through with the Southampton Landing. But until we have something like that from them, that they're not going to be cutting down and stripping along the creek for the rest of this development, I cannot support this movement at the moment.
You have any comments to that, Jay?
Yeah, so certainly the works that were approved were given permission by the SVCA, and that part of their mandate is ensure the proper flow of the channels and protection of the channel features. So I'm also not an expert, so I'm only taking some of their information that they got adequate information in order to make a decision. What we can do through this agreement and through the subdivision agreement is I guess there's two. The first one is this agreement itself secures the tree removal so that it doesn't go beyond the scope of what's there now. In other words, we're getting $500,000 from this developer so that we can make sure they don't make more mistakes, or that they don't make any mistakes. We can use that money to secure the site, for example. Secondly, through the subdivision agreement, they have prepared a restoration plan, and I'm certainly happy to share it ahead of the agreement if it would help. But not this agreement, but ahead of the subdivision agreement. I can share it at any time with you if you would like. And it shows how the stream feature would be restored. And I just had a conversation with the proponent today. That restoration plan includes the stream features, additional topsoil, hydroseeding, as well as shrub and tree features to stabilize the slope, as well as make sure the native species are able to return to the area over a rapid time frame rather than over 50 years, over like 5 to 10 years of normal tree growth. But again, I'm not an expert in that. I'm taking their landscape architect, our engineering staff, and the SVCA combined to review that at this stage.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for that, Jay. Excuse me. I've just never known the SVCA to allow clear stripping of any land right down to the stream. So if we could get something in there going, like where it is now, a lot of that's is supposed to be, according to the plans, environmental protected. It backs right onto the properties that go along Peel Street. It's not supposed to be touched. And I need a guarantee that will not be touched, that and that it's going to be replanted this year before any more erosion does happen.
Jay, is the best place to have that discussion during the pre-servicing agreement, or would it be better to have that discussion during the subdivision agreement discussion, which is going to happen soon? Because that, I assume, is where we're going to actually see the layout of the subdivision, and we're going to know what's going to be touched and what isn't. Am I right there?
Well, I mean, certainly the subdivision agreement discussion secures the infrastructure in formal and legal terms because we're going to become the owners of that infrastructure, or in the case of the land that backs onto Peel Street, we're going to become the owners of the land itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very direct, tangible point in which to have the specific discussions. Certainly the pre-servicing, as I've mentioned, we are securing the pre-servicing so that if they go beyond the scope of what they've agreed to, we've got $500,000 in order to ensure, I won't use the word guarantee because nothing's a guarantee in this sense, but it makes a sort of a legal and a contractual commitment from the landowner that they would not want to see that $500,000 go away because they're doing something they shouldn't. So I think the appropriate time to talk about restoration is at the subdivision agreement. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, to extend this. But the important thing is to secure the pre-servicing through this means, because we're going to have more legal and contractual rights than we did yesterday, for example.
Okay, and the Vice Deputy Mayor was next.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to Jay. Jay, the first phase of this development was 6 single-family dwelling units. The second phase is 40 single detached dwelling lots. How many phases will there be in the future? Is it phase 3, 4, 5? It's a very good sized property here. How many more lots are being planned for that whole development?
Hope you're on mute.
There are, say, 3 or 4 stages of construction, but there are like 5 pockets of development on the site. The first is the 6 lots you said. The second is another 40. The third is there's another 40, but there's also a commercial block at the highway south of the animal shelter or animal hospital, and then there's also a multi-unit block on Peel Street that it's associated with the subdivision, but it'll be planned at a separate stage.
Okay, I guess my point is, and I'm going to keep harping on affordable attainable housing, and pardon me, please bear with me. But, you know, we heard from Mr. Mayor, you commented on this at the last meeting, Brian Snyder, 5 secondary dwelling suites. You pushed hard for that, and you said, can you do more? And another development north of Waterloo or Devonshire, you know, where there's 52 units, and our Vice Deputy Mayor made comment, can we look at secondary dwelling suites? And lo and behold, you know, they come out with 22 secondary dwelling suites to help a family pay the mortgage by renting out the second unit. And you know, I just want to through you to Jay. Jay, you know, this Castle Village Development, Seton, Southampton Limited, you know, are you having those kinds of discussions with this developer in terms of, you know, what are they doing and what can they be doing to help address the affordable attainable housing situation here in this community? Because like every time we approve one of these and let it, I'm not gonna say slide by, this is very important for our community, the single family dwelling units, it's a good development. But, you know, we just, in my view, we just need to continue to work as hard as we can with these developers and say, look, we've got affordable attainable housing needs, and can you 10% of your units, you know, be more affordable, more attainable? Can there be some secondary dwelling suites attached? And so you're having those kinds of discussions with this developer, Jay?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that as well, Mike. Certainly, I take the lead from you, and as you demonstrate, as the mayor does too, and all of you, that it's never hurts to have a conversation. So we are having these conversations with both the developer and the builders. So with the builders, Alair Homes, that are building a McNabb, certainly Mr. Freeburn and his company very keen on the building accessory dwelling units. I think even a few of their houses in town have them, and you wouldn't be able to tell that they're there. Certainly the bylaw change that was recommended by committee on last Monday, would allow secondary dwelling units in in en suites or in basement units or upper floor apartments as of right, because these lots would all be within the R1 or R2 zone. I think it's R1. I think the developer is also warmly taken to a presentation by Councillor Grace and Minnie Jakes about universal design, and if not a commitment, certainly wrote back and told us they would like to seriously consider their multi-unit block on Peel to be 100% universal design, that those units would accommodate people with mobility issues and any accessibility needs. So those conversations are happening. I can't commit the developer at this point because we're still working on the agreement. There's a subdivision agreement. So,
well, thanks for that, and Councillor Grace, thanks for that too. I understand that presentation you made with developers went extremely well, and it sounds like you planted the seed. And Jay, you know, just stay the course and keep harping away with our developers that there are needs out there from the affordability, attainability standpoint. So we just keep saying it, and hopefully, and then I think they're listening, and there's some good things starting to happen by the sounds of it. So thanks, Mr. Mayor, for that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to go back, if I could, to a point raised by the deputy mayor about the pre-servicing agreement and tree preservation, tree retention. So for the subsequent phases that are planned attached to this, am I correct in until we have a pre-servicing agreement for each one of those subsequent phases, we don't really have, other than the SVCA agreement, any control over tree retention on those phases?
Well, we don't have a tree cutting bylaw and we don't have a lot grading bylaw. So there is we don't have the direct, bylaw power to go in and fine for removal or otherwise try to discourage removal. What we do is try to persuade them through these arrangements, as well as once we get them to secure it so that we have more heft in terms of our working with them. So we do encourage a rapid response and rapid review of these so that we can secure the needs that we find important. In this case, tree retention removal. I am confident we're working with a developer that wants to integrate tree preservation into the plans. In fact, I don't think I'm scooping my my director by saying this subdivision is proposed to have on-street trees, which is not usual for us. In fact, it's been many years since we've had trees planted within the right-of-way, and we want to do that as part of the restoration plan. But we want to make sure it's not impactful on our infrastructure as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further questions or comments? All right, well, thanks for this, Jay. It seems, us getting these agreements in place is an important step forward in terms of us being able to deal with some of the issues that we've heard from members of the public, as well as to begin our working relationship more closely with this particular developer. I think just to go back to what the Vice Deputy Mayor was saying, some of these agreements that we've been talking about in the last several weeks, subdivision agreements, and that we've been approving phases on, stem from agreements that are several years old and are already deeply in process, like the one we dealt with at planning last week down along the North Shore Road and Summerside. These ones, we've been working on them for several years. But as we go forward, and as we look at new subdivisions and new subdivision agreements, like this one is going to be coming before us, I think the expectation is going to be that developers have higher density and have affordable housing contained as part of those subdivisions before we sign off on those subdivision agreements. And so I think, we see 40 single detached lots in this pre-servicing agreement. People will look at that, I'm sure, and not see a lot of affordability in that. But this isn't a subdivision agreement, it's a pre-servicing agreement. And when we come to the subdivision agreement, it will certainly be my expectation, I guess I won't speak for all my colleagues, but it'll certainly be my expectation that there be a considerable amount of higher density and more attainable forms of housing, the missing middle, if you like, contained in this subdivision and its future phases, because if it doesn't contain that, it won't get my vote. So are there further questions or comments to the recommendation? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This one, I maybe should have sent a bit of a heads up on this one. I'm just kind of curious because we've got our water and wastewater stuff because of last week that's in the forefront. You know, all those plans are here. So I know I remembered one that stuck in my head from last week was that, you know, Southampton, when we were looking at the wastewater specifically on that one, we were looking at maybe another 200 units that we were able to provide services for in the ground. So just with this one, you said the first phase was 6, second one was 40, third one's going to be 40, and then there could be an apartment unit. We're pushing for high density, so maybe that means more services required. Are we getting close to that 200 number now with existing developments that we've got going on in Southampton? Are we getting closer? Is it anything that's that? So this may not be the time. Maybe this gets addressed more. I know we have studies underway to get this going, but it's just one of those things that I'm looking at the infrastructure that we're providing. Each time we sign on to these, we got to make sure we're ready. I know we're ready, but are we ready to continue this at this pace? Because for myself, I'm not a builder. Does this development happen in 2 years? Does it happen in 5 years? Does it happen in 10 years? It's one of those things that, you know, preemptive, right? I guess that's the question, maybe more for Director of Infrastructure, but, you know, I know Amanda's not on, but one of those things, I'm just curious if you can.
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm working on the master plan, and certainly those are, that's a very good question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, thank you, Councillor Carr. Those are important questions because yes, we would, although we would love to have higher density, this is a legacy subdivision. So a lot of our infrastructure planning was based on the approval that was given 35 years ago. It was late 80s, I think. I don't know of any single staff person works for the town when this was approved, but it's still there, and the developers got the commitment from that approval to work towards those subdivisions. So while we could add additional density, I would definitely be cautioning as saying like doubling or tripling it, but looking at modest improvements. Saying that, certainly, yes, it's true, 200 dwelling units before we have a capacity issue, or maybe it's a pump issue, I've forgotten specifically, but because those are built out over many years, and in fact in Southampton they're only accommodating maybe 10 to 15% of our housing development in any given year. They're maybe only building 10 to 15 or 20 houses a year, so it would take 10 years to get there, and by that point, based on the master plan, our Southampton treatment capacity should have increased, or at least we would have been able to, you know, subject to any hurdles that come up in the next few months during the ECA. It should be well financed, and, you know, with development charges, if I can harken back to earlier this evening, also help finance that new project as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I don't see any. So you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. That then moves us on to 7.7, communications and petitions for information. There are 6 items there. Does anybody want to have any comments on any of them? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And I would just like to recognize I'm delighted to see some information coming back from the Environmental Stewardship Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. This is something, as my constituents and all of our constituents, I'm assuming, often ask about. In particular, compost or green bins is mentioned throughout. And I'm keen to understand, I know this committee is newly off the ground, so I don't want to put any pressure, but I'm interested to hear when we may see a report or recommendations, if there's a timeline that perhaps Councillor Grace could allude to.
Well, the deadline for our committee is the end of the year. But certainly one of the areas that we have been looking closely at is the area of green bins, organics, collections. Councillor Rich is involved in that specifically because of his role on the Basra board, and he's been making some inquiries about options for that. We also in August have GM Blue Plan lined up to come and speak with the committee about that specific issue that I know many people are concerned about. So we're shooting for being finished and hopefully having our report done by the end of the year. It is a very, it's a large area of work that we have to do. One thing I can say that is really good news for us this past couple of weeks is that we have through former councillor Neil Minaj, made a really valuable connection with Wilfrid Laurier University, and have been speaking to a professor who's in their environmental sustainability department. He is going to be working with us through the summer, and we're planning to be able to work with some students to help us with the survey and some other studies that are relevant to the work of the committee.
Thank you. No, there's some excellent work being done, and I'm glad that you had an opportunity to share some of it with us, Councillor Grace.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions about any of the communications or petitions? I don't see any, so that moves us on to our final item, which is the report of department heads and the information report on the people plan refresh. And we have Sarah Wilson, who is a member of our staff ambassador group. Sarah.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the staff ambassador group, I'm here to share with you the revised people plan. The people plan was created in 2019 and is a reflection of our organization's core values and is a visionary document to make Saugeen Shores an even better place to work. The revised document is up to date and provides further content, which is reflective in the 2020 staff survey. We have plans in place for municipal assets, such as our waterfront master plan, our wastewater master plan, and staff of Saugeen Shores are another municipal asset. That's why we have the people plan. This revised people plan will be launched in the coming weeks. Both senior management team and the staff ambassador group have contributed to this document, and we're proud of this work. Lastly, I am proud to be an employee of the town of Saugeen Shores and want to say thank you to Mayor Charbonneau, members of council, and to the senior management team for supporting organizational effectiveness efforts such as the development of this people plan. Thank you, and I'm happy to hear any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there questions or comments about the people plan? I would, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
It was just really a thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Sarah. I know Jessica Linthorne was pretty active with this as well, and you've kind of taken over with writing this report tonight, and it's your first official report to council. And I know you did a great job with the Attainable Housing Task Force, Sarah, and this was a good report tonight, and just want to say keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments for Sarah? I guess, I mean, Sarah, you say in your report that our staff are one of our assets, but of course, that's not entirely the whole story. Our staff are our most important asset, and really without a strong and active and engaged group of municipal staff, we can't do any of what we do as a municipality. And we certainly are blessed as a council and as a community to have a really strong group of staff who consistently and continuously and every day go above and beyond to serve the people of this community in countless ways. And I hear about it in my day-to-day all the time. So it's great that we have this plan and that we're laying out what our core values are so we can attract more great people. And I know that we will, thanks to your work and the work of your colleagues in putting this plan together. So thank you very much for doing that. And I know council appreciates it a great deal.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of the committee of the whole, and we'll have announcements by members, and we'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just want people to realize that school does end this week. Even though we're still in COVID protocols, there'll be lots of little people out and about, so please be careful as you're driving around. And on that same note, please be careful. We still have COVID protocols in effect. Keep distance, wash your hands, wear a mask. And for those that haven't received their first or even their second doses, our local pharmacies and hockey hubs are ramping up to make sure that everybody does get a 2-dose summer in so that we can hopefully return to a happy and safe and normal fall. So any questions, please check online, check our website. We post lots of information that goes with that, or please contact any of our council members and they'll help direct you where you need to be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we've all heard lots about the horrific story about residential schools and in the news in the past while, and history unfolding, and it's just it's horrifying, really, what's happened. I had the opportunity. I just want to share with you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to attend the Shadows exhibit last Friday. Susan Seitz looks through her good work, excellent work, and then Brent Henry, of course, his room. It was really, he titles it "Come and See Culture or Oppressed." And if you have the opportunity, and some of you I think have been there, and I'd encourage members of the public, if you haven't seen the exhibit at the Southampton Art School, the staff have done a wonderful job. The exhibitors have done, the artists have done a wonderful job. And I think it's running till this Sunday. I read it to July 4th, the art school in Southampton. And if you have an opportunity, it's well worth the visit. And just wanted to commend our local and area artists, particularly Brent Henry and Susan Seitz, for their tremendous work. So just want to share that.
Indeed, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer my congratulations to our educators, our administrators, and students throughout the community. This has been a year unlike any other in terms of school year, and to those that thrived in the online learning environment, and to those who pushed through an uncomfortable year, congratulations and best luck in the next upcoming school year.
Thank you. Councillor Schreiber.
I think just a shout out to our local minor sports, men's and ladies summer sports programs as well. I know that we are trying to operate in different times. Last year, a lot of our leagues didn't take off at all, and we didn't see any play. So as we start to try to maneuver through those things, that congratulations and thank you to those organizers, and hopefully everybody can get out and enjoy their favorite sport this summer.
Thank you. Councillor Rich.
Nothing tonight.
Okay, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank and recognize all of our retailers, restaurant owners, and soon to be back in business services providers. And I know that it's been just such a challenging time for you, but you're continuing to be energetic, investing money in order to open up your patio space, and all of the other investments that you need to make to keep your businesses open to the public. And I know we all really appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mayette.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. One, I'd like to recognize the tremendous effort that the staff at all of the agencies that have been involved in this latest COVID outbreak have been putting through. I know just through my involvement with the United Way, our executive director, Francesca, and several of our staff members have been literally working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, running meals, running clothes, running supplies to those that are in quarantine and lockdown, trying to contain this thing. I wouldn't say it's futile, but it's gotten out and it's into the certain aspects of our community, and those people have been working tirelessly, and they continue to work tirelessly. And so just a shout out to all the volunteers and staff members of everybody from the Y Housing, United Way, Public Health. Everybody has been just working around the clock, and it's a tireless effort they're putting in. And the second thing is our reminder that the Lake Huron Fishing Club Salmon Spectacular, the Chantry Chinook Classic, is taking place July 24th until August the 2nd, with way stations in Kincardine and Port Elgin and up at Pike Bay and Wyerton. And so if you're a fisherman, fisher person, buy a ticket, fish. You don't have to have a fancy big boat with downriggers. Some of a couple of years ago, the largest trout was one off the pier in Kincardine. So shoreline fishing is an active way to enjoy it. And there's some big brown trout. There's a trout category and a salmon category. So you don't have to be the big fisherman to be out there. Just go cast a line off the dock. And if you've got a ticket in your pocket, you can win a great cash prize. So that's all for me tonight. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I guess two things for me. One thing, I attended the Westerio Power annual general meeting last week, which was my last official meeting as your representative on Westerio Power. And Director Phil Eagleson has now taken over for me, but I can report to council that Westerio's finances are strong, and and that the company remains committed to a considerable amount of capital improvement, particularly focused in the town of Saugeen Shores, still across its entire service area as well, but that the company stands ready to service not only our existing residents here, but our growing population in the town of Saugeen Shores, and I think stands well positioned to do that. And the second thing for me, and you guys have covered everything really well, but one thing I'll let you all know is that I'm going tomorrow for my second shot of COVID-19 vaccine. And frankly, I think there's no reason why the town of Saugeen Shores shouldn't reach the point where 100% of our eligible population gets both of those doses of COVID-19 vaccine. You can pretty well, at this point, based on the advice of our public health professionals, get any vaccine at all. And so take the one that you can get. If you haven't had one, go get it. And if you haven't had two, wait your 28 days and go get it. Just about everybody, apart from folks under 18, is eligible right now. And it sounds like, based on what public health has said today, like we're going to get a surge of vaccines and a surge of availability in Grey Bruce. And Dr. Era put out publicly today that he hopes to have the vaccine program completed in Grey Bruce by the end of July. So that's real soon, which means we're going to have a lot of vaccine, a lot of opportunity. So let's make sure Saugeen Shores is the most vaccinated community in Grey Bruce by the end of next month. Can we do that? All right. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilor Rich. All in favor? The committee stands adjourned. We'll recess and return at 25 after the hour. I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting. Second item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do so anytime if you need to. We do have one addition to the agenda, and it has been moved by Councilor Gray, seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, that the council agenda be amended to add item 8.1, motions and notice of motions regarding commissioning artwork as a reminder of the loss of life inflicted by the residential school system on the Indigenous peoples of Canada. Any questions or comments to that resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That then moves us on to public meetings. We have no public meetings. Adoption of the minutes is next. And we have the regular and special council minutes of June 14, 2021, and the committee of the whole minutes of June 14, 2021. And there's a resolution that council adopt the minutes of the council meetings of June 14, 2021, and note and file the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of June 14, 2021 as presented. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mattson, second by Grace. Any questions or comments to either of those or any of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, then that moves us on to report of the committee of the whole. And we have an infrastructure and development report regarding the delegation of land division responsibilities. And there is a resolution that council affirm in principle their interest in having the authority to consider land division responsibilities to be delegated to the council of the town of Saugeen Shores, and the council direct town staff to engage with County of Bruce staff and return with a recommendation regarding implementation and transition based on an analysis of the following: cost effectiveness, streamlining, and ability to address local context. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Myatt, seconded by Rich. Any questions or comments to the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right, then that moves us on to report of municipal officers and committees. And the first is a staff report on Southampton Business Improvement Area Streetscape Plan and Design Brief Consultant Award. And I have a resolution that council authorized the awarding of the contract for consulting services for the Southampton BIA Streetscape Plan and Design Brief to John McDonald Architect Incorporated in the amount of $20,000 plus HST to be funded from the Southampton BIA reserves, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary agreements. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace, seconded by Schreider. Is there any questions or comments to that resolution? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm obviously very supportive. I'm just wondering if, through you to our clerk, Linda White, and we heard from Mr. Longmire earlier this evening, and I'm just wondering, sometimes information, doesn't make its way to people, or they can't find it, but is there a possibility, Linda, we could maybe reach out to Mr. Longmire in light of the fact he made a presentation tonight. He has a real interest in what's happening with bump outs. Could someone reach out to him perhaps? Would that be fair request, or just to let him know this study is happening? And
yeah,
yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this resolution?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting that this is a BIA-led project, and it's funded in whole by the BIA. However, the findings of that streetscape study will have impacts, and future projects will be coming to council for approval. So we really wanted to include council at the early stages, even though it's truly a BIA project, to keep you engaged in the project, as it's highly expected future projects will come to council for consideration.
But I do anticipate, based on the resolution, that it is required for myself and the clerk to sign off on this agreement, or is it an agreement that is going to be entered into by the president of the BIA, or president, I guess, of the BIA?
We're asking for your approval tonight, council's approval as whole. It is, however, a BIA project, and they'll enter the agreement.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're clear on that then. Are there any other questions or comments? Councilor Grace.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe this would be a question for Phil, and that is do you know at this point, or is it too early to know what the process for public consultation is going to be through this consulting process?
I think it is a little early. Councillor Rich may be aware, as he was involved in the evaluation of some of the RFPs, but I don't believe it's been scheduled by any means at this point.
There will be some consultation, obviously. You know, the process is really pretty much in its infancy right now. It's something that they've been working towards for a long period of time. I think that there was enough concern, especially with the last development. They wanted to make sure that there was good public consultation this time, and that whatever the design was that was going forward, that they felt like they would have a larger support. So in that, public consultation will be a big part of it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I think, as we said, when the delegation from the BIA was before us several weeks ago, this is an important project to allow us to move forward with some streetscape improvements in downtown Southampton. We have sort of stalled on that since our last effort at this, so we're very hopeful that this is a successful process. Public consultation is going to be a critical component of that. I know the BIA is aware of it, and so we'll need to see lots of that. I'm sure that's going to happen, and I'm just very much looking forward to seeing the final recommendation come back and we get it approved so we can move forward with some much needed streetscape improvements in Southampton. So if there's nothing further, then I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. All right, and that moves us on to the second report, which is a striking committee report. Sorry. And there is a resolution that CAO Caravan Mile be appointed to the Municipal Innovation Council. In accordance with the Memorandum of Understanding with the Municipal Innovation Council, Saugeen Shore's appointed member will serve as the chair of the MIC and sit on the board of directors of the Nuclear Innovation Institute, and that the following representatives, and that the following representatives be appointed to the Bruce Gray Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee: Dave Mayette, Councillor, Chief of Police, Clerk, and Pat O'Connor as appointed by the Saugeen Shores Police Services Board. Is there a mover and seconder, first and foremost? Masson and Grace. Any questions or comments to that resolution? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to thank the striking committee for the tremendous amount of confidence they've placed in me to sit on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee, and I will do the best I can to represent council there.
Well, thank you for that. And we probably owe you a bigger debt of gratitude than you owe us. Thank you for agreeing to serve, and a thank you to all of those who are agreeing to serve, and the chief, the clerk, of course, and Mr. O'Connor. we have an opportunity to have, actually, we have an opportunity to have even one more representative than this on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Task Force. So if any member becomes interested in that, we certainly, the striking committee is always ready to strike and appoint you to the committee. So we're only a phone call away. Anyway, if there's nothing further, you've heard the resolution, and I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, and so then that moves us on to motions and notice of motion. And we do have this motion, which has been added to the agenda, and there is, Linda, should I take the resolution to suspend the procedural rules first and then come to the main question? How should I do that?
That would be appropriate to separate that.
So it has been moved by Deputy Mayor Matheson and seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt that the procedural bylaw rules be suspended to waive the notice of motion to allow debate to occur at the June 28th, 2021 council meeting. I'll ask all in favor of that. That's carried. All right, so I will read the resolution, then we can have discussion. It's resolved that whereas it is council's, it's moved by Matheson, seconded by Myatt, that whereas it is council's desire to commission a work of art that will stand as a continual reminder for council, staff, and the community at large of the pain, suffering, and loss of life inflicted by colonialism and by the residential school system on the Indigenous peoples of Canada. Be it resolved that council directs staff to commission artist Brent Henry of Saugeen Shores to create a work of art in his own style and for display by the town of Saugeen Shores, and that council authorizes up to $3,000 to be spent for this purpose from an appropriate reserve fund. Questions or comments to the resolution? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this this motion wholeheartedly. I too visited the Shadows art exhibit at the Southampton Arts Centre. This was on June 19th. And Brent Henry, the artist in question, was raised in Southampton as a member of Saugeen First Nation. His exhibit looks at Canadian Indian residential schools, how they impacted the children who attended them and the generations of their relatives before and after them, as well as Indigenous culture overall. Brent's work is very powerful and disturbing, and that's the point. We all need to confront this part of Canadian history. All Canadians have a responsibility to learn about what happened in residential schools. Doing so will help the general population better understand First Nations peoples and cultures. There are still a lot of misconceptions, negativity, and hostility towards First Nations people. And as I said, I support the motion to commission a piece of Brent's work, as I believe this is a positive step towards building a more authentic relationship with our neighbors and friends in Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. When we understand each other better, we can move forward together.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions or comments to the resolution? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I won't really elaborate too much on what Councillor Grace has said so well. I couldn't have said it any better. I certainly support this, and I just want to thank you also, Mr. Mayor. I know you did spent a lot of time on this in the last few days, and speaking with Mr. Henry and talking about the potential for this, and I think it's great the work you've done and to get us to this stage, and so this is a good thing we're doing, and as Councilor Grace said it so well, so I'll be supporting.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments? I would just say that I did speak to Mr. Henry and asked him if he would be willing to complete this work for the town of Saugeen Shores, and he certainly expressed a willingness and an excitement to do that. And the number in this resolution is based on that conversation that I had with him. And I also, like many of you, have visited the exhibition at the Art Gallery and had the chance to speak with Mr. Henry. And I think that Councillor Grace uses the right word. His work is disturbing. It's off-putting. It's upsetting even, and that's exactly as it should be and as it needs to be. That isn't intended. That's intended as as a highest compliment to Mr. Henry, because that's what he's trying to do, and he achieves it. And I think that this resolution talks about a piece of art that will stand as a continual reminder. And my greatest fear, I know many of you share it, is that right now our society is taken with this issue, is seized with it, but societies have a way of moving on to the next shiny object, whatever that shiny object may be. And this is something that we just cannot move on from until we've resolved it. And that so will be a long time coming, but it's something that we have to focus on until we do. And as a community that is the proud home to many Indigenous people and a neighbor to an Indigenous nation, we have an obligation, I think, to focus on this issue and remain focused on it, and to have permanent reminders in our municipal buildings and elsewhere of our obligation here and our need to work on this. So I'm hopeful this resolution will pass, and I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Henry and having this piece of art for our community. So with that, if there's no further discussion, then I will ask all in favor of the resolution. That is carried. That moves us then on to bylaws, and there are 6 bylaws there for consideration. Does anybody wish to have any one of those drawn up for individual consideration? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Bylaw number 48-2021, Mr. Mayor.
48-2021, the Pumpkin Fest one?
Yes.
Okay, we'll circle that one. Are there any others? Don't see any. Okay. Is there a mover and seconder for the resolution before I read it here? Moved by Rich, seconded by Schreider. So I'm going to read those separately with the same mover and seconder. It is resolved that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 28th day of June 2021. 143-2021 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement with Bruce and Grey County upper and lower tier municipalities for the implementation of the Bruce Grey Community Wellbeing Plan Advisory Committee. 244-2021 being a bylaw to opt out of the vacant unit rebate program. 345-2021 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2006 being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town of Saugeen Shores by Ernest Properties Incorporated for lands described as Southampton Part Lot DN Clarendon Street, reference plan 3R9974 Part 1, Southampton, Town of Saugeen Shores. 446-2021 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2006 being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Town of Saugeen Shores by Ernest Properties Incorporated for lands town plot part lot 16W Victoria, Southampton, Town of Saugeen Shores. 547-2021 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2006 being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Town of Saugeen Shores affecting all lands within the Town of Saugeen Shores. And 749-2021 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meetings of the corporation of the Town of Saugeen Shores. It's already been moved and seconded. Are there questions or comments to any of those bylaws? If not, all in favor? That's carried. All right, and then we have one more bylaw, which I will read. It's been moved by Rich, seconded by Schreider, that the following bylaws hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 28th day of June 2021. 648-2021 being a bylaw to enter into a lease agreement with the Port Elgin Pumpkin Fest Association for the Port Elgin Flea Market. Questions or comments to that bylaw? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is really through you to Jane Dagalowski, our Director of Community Services. Jane, I see there's a $5,000 amount in the in here that they will pay to the Town of Saugeen Shores. And just if you could refresh my memory here for Council, Jane, there's a piece of playground equipment down there that's that's aging, and I'm just wondering, is that, I know the Port Elgin Tourist Association used to also contribute $5,000 towards waterfront improvements. Is that where this $5,000 goes, Jane? And I guess I'm asking, is that part of what could happen with those funds that playground equipment could be replaced? I know you won't do it for $5,000, but is that where the monies get spent is for the Port Elgin waterfront?
Yeah, typically during budget deliberations, when there are capital projects that are deemed worthy at the waterfront, there have been occasion where we have pulled money from that reserve. I'll remind council that our last big draw from that reserve would have been for the beach house when we did the construction of that. And I think a majority of it was probably depleted at that time.
So just a follow up. So Jane, that reserve fund probably doesn't have a significant amount of dollars in it, then, is what you're saying. And is that playground equipment due for replacement, Jane?
I just want to make sure we're referring to the same playground equipment. You're referring to the one in front of the beach house?
Yes, yes.
It isn't. We have other playground equipment that is due for replacement prior to that one.
Okay.
But there is a plan to have
That's
it
fine,
replaced.
but that's where the money is spent for Port Algon Waterfront. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Correct.
It's important to be clear to the director. The actual amount of money is going to be negotiated closer to the end of the season, right? That $5,000 figure may not be the ultimate figure because we're uncertain of the impact of COVID-19. That's correct, right?
Certainly, it's identified in the report as well that we will negotiate that with the group afterwards. And it's important to note that they are working within their means as far as step 2, which is going from 25% to 50% capacity.
Yeah. Yep, and that seems fair. Thanks for that clarification. Is there any further questions or comments to that bylaw? I don't see any, so all in favor? That is carried. Okay, so that then moves us on to, we've already passed the confirmatory bylaw, so I have a motion that this regular council meeting of June 28, 2021 hereby adjourns at 8:45 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Smith, seconded by Carr. All in favor? We stand adjourned.